Before Mason was Mason, before Lewis Lacey arrived in 1836 to build the sawmill beside the Sycamore Creek, before the first school was built in 1873, before the Methodist circuit preacher started his rounds, there was a history before Mason's history. Years ago, glaciers covered Ingham County, melting, retreating, and reforming, creating the hills and valleys. One of the important remnants of that time is the Hogsback Esker, running from Lansing south almost to Leslie, creating a valuable source of sand and gravel. Mason's history began in the 1800s with the arrival of men like Reuben Bullen, George Webb, Orlando Barnes, and Minos McRobert. It was a brave move for these men to come with their families to the wilderness that was the Michigan frontier. It was a land of forest and abundant wildlife. The Chippewa Indians hunted and fished here. Chief Okemos was a frequent visitor. Mason was not the first settlement in this area. In 1838, a town called Jefferson was platted 3.5 miles north, but not recorded in Ingham County. It was abandoned. In 1838, after the first organization of the county, a site in northwestern Vevay Township was laid out as the county seat. Mason Center, as Mason was called then, soon grew up along Sycamore Creek. In 1838, post offices were established in Mason and Leslie. H.B. Danforth was named Mason postmaster. Once a week, William H. Horton carried the mail, wrapped in a handkerchief, between Mason and Leslie. He received $1.20 for the round trip, which took a day. In 1901, Mr. Bullen became Mason's first rural mail carrier. The plat for the village of Mason was recorded in 1838. It was laid out in 31 blocks, with the western boundary near the east bank of Sycamore Creek. Mason was named the county seat by an act of the Michigan legislature in 1840. It was named for Governor Stevens T. Mason. Mason is believed to be the only place in the United States where the state capital is not located in the county seat. Ingham County is named for Samuel D. Ingham, a member of President Andrew Jackson's cabinet. Mason was incorporated as a village in 1865. On March 27th of that year, the first election was held, with 36 votes cast. Dr. McRobert was elected mayor. 10 years later, Mason was incorporated as a city, with 2 wards, each having an elected alderman. Rosalvo Griffin was elected mayor that year. Ingham County's first court sessions were held in the school in the 100 block of North Jefferson Street. The first courthouse was built in 1843 at 142 East Ash Street. The county jail was built behind the courthouse. When the second courthouse was built, the old building was moved to 721 South Jefferson. The second courthouse, a brick building, was built in 1858 in the center of the square at a cost of $12,229. Trees were planted in the square, and watering troughs were placed in the 2 front corners of the block, as well as an artesian well used for watering horses and fighting fires. A bandstand for social gatherings and concerts was also built on the square. In 1902, the Ingham County Board of Supervisors appropriated $40,000 to build a new courthouse. However, the total cost was $102,814. It was dedicated on May 9, 1905. Many renovations have been made to the courthouse over the years. In 1994, $2.5 million was spent to renovate it. During the Civil War, men from the village and the townships gathered in Mason and walked to Jackson to take the train south. During the Spanish-American War and World War I, they boarded the train in Mason. Veteran parades of celebration were held here. The first schoolhouse, a one-story frame building 16 by 29 feet, was built in Mason in 1837. The teacher, Miss Lucy Rolfe, was paid $1 a week. In 1847, a new building, 2 stories with 2 rooms, was built on North Jefferson. An addition was built later. In 1864, $600 was voted to build a new schoolhouse. Instead, the money was used to repair the existing building. Mason's first high school was built in 1870, and the Second Ward School was built in 1880. In 1903, the voters approved funds for a new 2-story school at Jefferson and Oak. This building was used until it was destroyed by fire in 1921. It was replaced in 1923 and used as a school until the early 1980s. The Jefferson Street School was also the home of Ingham County Normal, the teacher training school. The first Methodist church building was built in 1855 and was destroyed by lightning in 1865. The congregation returned to the courthouse to worship until a new building was completed in 1867. This building served the congregation for nearly 100 years until the present sanctuary was built. The Presbyterians first held services in the homes of congregates and in the courthouse. A church on East Oak Street was built in 1869. In the fall of 1897, construction began on the present church, which was built with 1,125 loads of stone from the countryside. The Christian Science congregation met in the former Langley Rayner home at the corner of Oak and Barnes until 1997, when it became the second museum of the Mason Area Historical Society. The Pink School on West Ash was the first museum. The First Baptist Church was built in 1865 and was used till 1963. Many different churches have contributed to Mason's growth. Maple Grove Cemetery was established in 1844 when the Vevay Township Board of Health leased land for 300 years. The cemetery is on the National Register of Historic Places. Mason had its first automotive hearse in 1911. Fire was a constant danger in the city's early years. Memorable fires included the burning of the sawmill in 1847, the lightning fire that destroyed the Methodist Church in 1865, and years later the American Legion fire. In December 1876, fire destroyed 8 buildings on the northeast corner of Jefferson and Maple. A line of men passed buckets of water from the reservoir on the courthouse lawn to the buildings. A line of women returned the buckets to be filled. 3 more downtown fires would rage before City Council approved the purchase of a Silsbee steam pumper for $3,800. Firemen pulled it to fires. In 1919, the city purchased a fire truck, and the firemen no longer had to pull the pumper. In the 1880s and 90s, city fathers recognized a need for a safe and adequate water supply. Disease such as typhoid fever was prevalent due to contaminated water. In 1891, the voters approved a bond for a new water system, which included the Jefferson Street standpipe, which was used for over 100 years. By New Year's Day 1892, the water system included 9 miles of water mains and street hydrants. Before Mason became a village, the Ingham County Sheriff's Department provided police protection. After 1865, Mayor McRobert had the authority to appoint a marshal. The voters in each of the 2 wards elected a constable. By 1942, the city had a chief, 3 officers, and a police car. Natural disaster has touched Mason several times over the years. A 1935 cyclone damaged the high school, ripped up trees and power poles, and damaged businesses. In the spring of 1947, a flood wiped out the West Elm Street Bridge and a portion of the railroad tracks. In 1967, 24 inches of snow fell in 24 hours, effectively closing the town down. J.W. Phelps was an early businessman coming to Mason from Seneca County, New York in 1845. He was a physician and also operated a hardware store. Many businesses have left their mark on the community over the years. Phoenix Mills, built in 1858. The Mason Elevator, which traces its beginnings to Edward A. Barnes. And in 1895, the creamery was located in downtown Mason. The milk plant, which processed milk from local dairy farms, began operating in 1921. It had several owners. Wyeth Arist, manufacturer of baby formula, was the last milk operation. Mason's first hospitals were operated in homes by a doctor or a nurse. Mason City Hospital was built by Dr. Corso and housed in a brick building on Ash Street. Mason General Hospital, built with community funds on land donated by Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Jewett, opened its doors on November 29, 1958. In 1880, Mason was one of the first Michigan towns to have an opera house. It was built by the children of John B. Rayner as a tribute to their father. It became the social center of the town. The Opera House opened on January 14, 1881, with a performance of Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was the site of lectures, graduations, receptions, and plays, and also hosted a special wedding of little people. In 1922, Roy Adams purchased the Opera House and converted it to the Fox Movie Theater. It had several owners and was eventually torn down in the early 1970s, along with the adjoining City Hall. A series of hotels served visitors to Mason during the early years. Places like the Rise, the Sweeney, the Donnelly, the McEwen, and the Hawley. The first Ingham County Fair was held on the Courthouse Square in 1854. The first land for the fair was on the northwest corner of Kip and Jefferson. In 1930, the Ingham County Road Commission purchased part of the Rayner Farm on East Ash for use as fairgrounds, park, and a jail farm. In 1863, community leaders from Lansing, Mason, and Leslie met to form a railroad company with backing from Jackson. Construction of the Lansing-Jackson line started in 1865 and reached Mason the following year. The railroad ties were logs furnished by farmers along the route. Sand and gravel came from the Hogsback Esker. The coming of the railroad was an exciting time. People would go to the depot just to watch the trains go by. In 1910, the electric interurban that ran between towns was built along the railroad tracks. We cannot leave Mason's early history without looking at some of the businesses that have been a part of that history.